General Hospital will reveal the plot is exciting and you have to watch as things get more chaotic than ever. First, Willow had left Port Charles in a state of despair so profound that nothing seemed capable of healing her wounded heart. Her journey all the way to Germany was not just a trip. It was a desperate quest for answers, a battle between fragile hope and the fear of rejection. When she arrived at the hospital where Michael was being treated, her heart pounded in her chest with such intensity that it felt like it might explode. Yet everything crumbled to dust when she was coldly turned away by a nurse. The unfamiliar woman, showing not a shred of sympathy, bluntly declared that Michael did not want to see Willow and would not change his mind. Willow stood frozen, the world seemingly collapsing beneath her feet. She could not comprehend why the man she loved with all her soul would treat her this way, without explanation, without a single look of understanding. But the truth was far more brutal. Behind the closed doors, Drew had quietly orchestrated everything. Feeling the ground slipping away from under his authority, Drew had ordered that Willow be blocked from visiting. He, who had once been a pillar of support and trust, had now turned into the architect of her despair with cold, calculated manipulation. And it didn't end there. Drew, unaware of the full extent of the danger closing in on him, had already fallen into a far deadlier trap. Nina and Carly, determined to sever any remaining ties between Willow and Drew, had crafted a vicious plan, setting up a prostitute to lure Drew into a scandal from which there would be no return. In a moment of loneliness and weakness, Drew stumbled into the trap, not even realizing he had become their prey. If Willow ever discovered the horrifying truth, her response would not merely be sorrow, it would be utter devastation. She would feel betrayed, violated to the core. The man she had once tried to forgive, the man she had dared to trust again, would have gutted her trust in the worst possible way. Rage, heartbreak, and overwhelming bitterness would rip open her old wounds, making them bleed anew, but this time with an intensity far beyond what she had ever known. Willow was not someone who would simply collapse under such betrayal. She would confront Drew, not with weak tears, but with a gaze cold as ice and accusations sharp as knives. There would be no room left for forgiveness. Every word she spoke would be a dagger thrust into Drew's guilt, and in that shattering moment between two people once bonded by trust and hope, only cruelty and desolation would remain. Their confrontation would not end with harsh words alone. Willow, her pride burning from the betrayal, would never allow herself to be pitted or manipulated again. She would declare the absolute end of everything between her and Drew, tearing apart whatever fragile thread still connected them. Another painful chapter of Willow's life would close with her walking away without a backward glance, leaving Drew to drown in the ruins he had created. And somewhere, Nina and Carly, despite their apparent success in driving a wedge between them, could never have anticipated the full consequences of their actions. For Willow, driven by her pain and fury, would rise from the ashes as a force far more dangerous and uncontrollable than they had ever imagined. Second, moving forward, Nina continuously urged Willow to return home to Drew, presenting herself as kind, caring, and full of concern. Yet beneath that sweet facade lay a dark and ruthless scheme far more sinister than anyone could imagine. Together with Portia, Nina had secretly devised a plan to permanently remove Drew from Willow's life. Both women, each driven by their own selfish motives, had decided that Drew had to be eliminated. And they were willing to resort to the vilest tactics to achieve their goal. Everything was meticulously arranged, from carefully orchestrated setups to hiring a prostitute to destroy Drew's reputation. But what Nina failed to anticipate was that Willow's wounded and chaotic heart would not be so easily manipulated. Willow's return home was nothing short of a nightmare rather than the new beginning anyone had hoped for. From the very first moment she stepped into the house that should have been her sanctuary, she could feel the heavy tension in the air, averted eyes, forced smiles, and a suffocating silence that seemed to accuse her without words. Willow's instincts, though battered by countless betrayals and heartbreaks, screamed that something was terribly wrong. Drew's cold demeanor, his awkwardness whenever their eyes met. All created an undercurrent of unease that tore at Willow's already fragile heart. Unable to stop herself from doubting, she began searching for answers. Dreading that what she uncovered would be worse than anything she had ever feared. As the weekend approached, Drew desperately tried to justify himself with every excuse he could muster. He spoke of misunderstandings, hidden conspiracies, and mistakes that he admitted to but tried to minimize through belated regret. His words, though seemingly sincere, rang hollow to Willow, who by now understood that once trust is broken, it cannot easily be restored. Everything seemed to unfold just as Nina had envisioned. Drew was weakened, Willow was slipping away. And the plan to sever their bond appeared to be succeeding. However, Nina had not foreseen that Willow's stubborn, hopeless attachment to Drew would become the biggest obstacle to her plan. In her desperation and refusal to accept reality, Willow clung to the belief that everything was just a misunderstanding, that Drew, despite his flaws, still deserved forgiveness. Her weakness, her refusal to face the truth, threatened to render Nina's meticulous plan meaningless. Refusing to accept defeat, Drew made a bold and desperate move. In a reckless gamble, he approached the prostitute Nina had hired and offered her a large sum of money to switch sides. The deal was simple, in exchange for her silence and a fabricated story. She would claim that it was Nina who orchestrated the entire setup, that she was merely following Nina's orders to entrap Drew. The amount of money offered was too much for the woman to refuse. In an instant, Drew seized his only chance to salvage his dignity and simultaneously destroy Nina's credibility. Everything began to unravel rapidly. The prostitute's accusations, the indirect evidence, and Nina's increasingly panicked reactions caused those around her to start doubting her. Willow, though still torn and confused, could no longer ignore the mounting signs. Once again, she found herself standing at a crossroads. Either continue lying to herself or confront the harsh reality that the people she trusted most had betrayed her in the most vicious ways imaginable. Inner turmoil, pain, and fury raged within her like a storm that could not be contained. Although Drew had temporarily escaped the danger of losing everything, he knew that the price he would have to pay for his mistakes would be steep. Willow might forgive, but she would never forget. Even if their relationship survived, it would forever be shadowed by doubt and pain. As for Nina, who once believed she had won, she now faced the looming threat of exposure and the inevitable retribution from those she had sought to manipulate and destroy. The story was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. And ahead lay a covert war where no one could truly emerge victorious. Only wounds, losses, and lingering sorrow would continue to burn, consuming everything that remained in the hearts of those who had once believed that love could heal all wounds. Third, the latest revelations from General Hospital hint at an unmissable moment that is slowly taking shape, centering on Dante and Lulu. Two individuals whose past love story once burned with an intensity that few could match, now drawn together again by the intricate hand of fate. What initially appears to be an ordinary conversation between them quickly unfolds into a deeply emotional and tumultuous encounter, where long-buried feelings resurface, raw and overwhelming. As Dante stands before Lulu, his eyes betray a mixture of guilt, longing, and unspoken regret, while Lulu, the woman who has carried the weight of unimaginable losses, struggles to maintain her composure, her breath catching under the strain of memories too painful to revisit. In that fragile, heart-wrenching moment, Lulu may find herself unable to hold back the flood of emotions that have been locked away inside her for far too long. She could shed the facade of strength she has so carefully built, allowing herself to be vulnerable, to let the tears fall as she confronts the man who once held her heart in his hands. She may voice the pain she has endured, the regrets she has buried, and the hopes she once dared to believe in, only to watch them shatter. But their conversation is not destined to remain solely about the wreckage of their shared past. Hidden beneath Lulu's heartbreak lies a far more explosive secret, the truth about Brooke Lynn's adoption, a truth that has been gnawing at her conscience, demanding to be set free. Dante, astute and perceptive, is not blind to the growing tension. He has witnessed the strained interactions, the nervous glances, the uncomfortable silences between Lulu and Brooke Lynn in recent days. These signs, subtle though they may be, do not escape the notice of a man who once knew Lulu better than anyone else. Dante can sense that Lulu is waging an intense inner battle. Torn between her loyalty to a friend and the need to unburden herself of a truth that weighs more heavily with each passing day. The truth about Gio, the child at the center of Brooke Lynn's mysterious adoption saga, remains buried in shadows. Brooke Lynn, ever the master of controlling appearances, has gone to great lengths to keep the past sealed away. But how much longer can she maintain the charade? Every secret has a lifespan, and this one, festering in silence, is a ticking time bomb, ready to detonate and leave devastation in its wake. As emotions swell and tension thickens during Lulu and Dante's meeting, one question looms larger than any other: will Lulu allow her heart, fractured by sorrow, to betray her intentions and accidentally spill the devastating truth she has sworn to protect? Or will she cling to the crumbling mask of pretense, continuing to deny herself the release she so desperately needs, even as it tears her apart inside? Dante, though still grasping at fragments, stands at a pivotal crossroads himself, either to trust the half-truths being offered to him or to dig deeper, risking everything in pursuit of a truth that could forever alter the lives of those he holds most dear. General Hospital seems to be steering its audience toward an emotional storm of epic proportions, a reckoning where love, betrayal, guilt, and long-buried secrets will collide in a cataclysmic fashion. At the heart of this maelstrom stand Lulu, Dante, Brooke Lynn, and the still innocent Gio, each of them poised to face the inevitable consequences of choices made long ago. Lulu's conversation with Dante could very well be the first crack in the dam, setting off a cascade of revelations that no amount of regret or denial could ever undo. If Lulu falters, if even a hint of the truth escapes her lips, it would unleash a tidal wave of consequences. Dante, driven by his instincts as both a detective and a man betrayed too many times before, would not stop until every piece of the puzzle was unearthed. Brooke Lynn's carefully constructed world would collapse, exposing her to scorn and condemnation. And Gio, the child whose life was unknowingly built on a lie, would be thrust into a reality far more complicated and painful than anyone had dared to imagine. The seeds of destruction have been sown, and the ground beneath these characters is growing increasingly unstable with each passing second. As Dante and Lulu's paths intertwine once more, what was meant to be a moment of bittersweet reunion may instead become the catalyst for a series of events that will tear families apart, shatter friendships, and leave irreparable scars on everyone involved. And through it all, one truth becomes painfully clear: no secret stays buried forever, no matter how deeply it is hidden or how desperately it is guarded. The day of reckoning is coming, and when it does, no one, least of all Lulu, will be able to escape its reach. Finally, next week, General Hospital promises an explosive moment centered entirely on Christina, one of the most emotionally complex and vulnerable members of the Corinthos Davis family. For a long time, Christina has struggled with inner conflicts, past mistakes, and the crushing weight of familial expectations, but never before has she felt so deeply betrayed. Diane had completed all the necessary paperwork to have Christina committed to a psychiatric facility, believing it was the best solution to help her overcome her instability. Everything was ready, every signature, every form in place, waiting only for the right moment to execute the plan. Yet, at the very last minute, Alexis, torn by guilt and haunted by her own mistakes, changed her mind. It could have ended quietly if not for a fateful clerical error. In an unfortunate mix-up, the commitment papers intended for Christina were confused with legal documents concerning Molly. While reviewing the files, the assistant district attorney stumbled upon the shocking paperwork. exposing the secret Alexis had desperately tried to keep hidden. Molly, ever the champion of truth and principle, did not hesitate to bring the documents to Christina's attention, thrusting her straight into an emotional firestorm. Christina's fury erupted like an unstoppable blaze. Her eyes, normally so full of vulnerability and warmth, now burned with hurt and uncontainable anger as she confronted the mother she had always loved and resented in equal measure. To Christina, Alexis's actions were nothing short of a brutal betrayal, undeniable proof that her mother had never truly trusted her or accepted her for who she was. In that moment, every old wound reopened. Every painful memory of judgment, control, and disappointment rose to the surface with ferocious intensity. With her pride shredded and her heart bleeding, Christina did not hesitate to confront Alexis, demanding an explanation. But the real question remained: would Alexis have the courage to admit the true reasons behind her betrayal? Would she reveal that her fears were not solely for Christina's well-being, but also deeply rooted in her own self-preservation, that Ava Jerome had been using Christina's reckless behavior as leverage to blackmail her? That the secret war between Alexis and Ava now threatened not only Alexis's reputation but her very freedom? The situation had grown far more complicated than any of them anticipated. If Alexis chose to tell the whole truth, she would be forced to expose her own vulnerability, something she had spent years trying to hide even from herself. If she continued to lie or conceal the full story, the chasm between her and Christina would widen into something irreparable. Meanwhile, Christina, her sense of dignity torn apart, would have to decide whether she could ever forgive the mother who once again had placed her fate in the hands of the law without her consent. Whatever the outcome, it was certain that this confrontation would leave lasting scars. Emotional wounds, lost trust, and deep-seated misunderstandings would continue to haunt the relationship between Christina and Alexis, pulling them into an endless cycle of love, disappointment, and hurt with no easy escape. And lurking in the background, Ava watched silently, ready to extend the Corinthos Davis family's misery if it meant achieving her own selfish goals. This clash between Christina and Alexis was not just an ordinary argument. It was a battle over loyalty, over dignity, over who truly had the right to control Christina's life, and, above all, over whether unconditional love could survive such profound betrayal. When all the words were spoken and every truth laid bare, only one question would remain: would the bond between mother and daughter be strong enough to withstand these wounds? Or had it already been irreparably broken?